Hi, my name is Lorna Muthamia Uchido, and I'm making it one of my life's mission to demystify the speech therapy field and to empower more parents on what they can start to do in order to optimize their child's communication outcomes. So whether you want your child to talk more or talk better, learn better, and overall optimize their potential. So stay tuned and feel free to send in any topics on speech and language development you'd like for me to tackle. Well, hello and welcome to this tip for today, which is on how to expand expand your child's sentences or expand their vocabulary. And I'm going to demonstrate or illustrate with a very simple, just a noun. Yeah. So a hammer. And these are just little tips that you can use and apply to any language or rather any topic that you're trying to expand your child's vocabulary in, because that's how your child's going to be able to say multiple things in a sentence or be able to say complex sentences. So one way of building your child's sentences, and obviously if you're building your child's sentences, you're clearly also building their vocabulary, is by getting them to expand on nouns. And I teach children to expand their nouns by teaching them how to describe. Now, there is a formula actually for describing. I was trying to get comfortable. I think it's going to be a long video. Well, I'll try for it not to be too long. Yeah. So I get children to, there is a formula for describing. And the formula is you start with the overarching, term, or rather group name or category name. And we call those categories, so speech pathologists call them, semantic categories. And I don't know if I said my name. My name is Lorna Muthamia Uchido. I'll probably say it again at the end. I'm just getting back into the swing of doing videos, and I've just realized it's actually a skill that if it's not used, it almost, it disappears. When I was doing these videos a couple of years ago, I'd become really quick. Now just setting up and putting the camera, obviously I'm self-shooting. It's almost like I've got things holding and I'm just like, oh, I need to be still. Anyway, back to this. So I was saying there is a formula for how we describe, or how we describe words in an orderly manner or an organized way. And I usually describe, or rather I help children understand how we describe things by telling them the formula. And the formula is you talk about the name of the group that item belongs to. So if your child's a toddler, if your child's a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, you're probably not going to want to start with something that's in this group. You might want to try something that is highly familiar, like a food item or a clothing item or an animal, because children love, and they probably already know the animals, quite a few animals. And so I use this with a little guy who is about 6 years, 5 or 6 years, and he knows that it's a hammer, but then beyond a hammer, there's nothing much that he does say about this. So we went over, okay, so tell me a bit more about hammer. And I said, well, so what's the group name? Oh yeah, and he actually supplied it. He said, it's a tool. I'm like, yeah, it's a tool. And what else can you tell me about the hammer? And I said, oh, can you describe some of the features? So you can always describe the features, and you can say, what's this long part here? Oh, what is it? So you might supply that for your child. Oh, it's a handle. Oh, yeah, it's a handle. What about this top part? Oh, I don't know. What is that part that looks like this? What is that? What do you think that's called? And you might again have to supply the language. Say, well, it looks like a claw, doesn't it? And you might talk about something else that has a claw, just like that. I might say, oh, like I think tigers have claws, don't they? So this is a claw. There's a claw at the end of the hammer. And what about this other part? Is that clawed as well? Oh, no. So that looks flat. It looks like a head, right? And then you can go on and talk about, what do you think the claws there are for? And I remember this little guy said, well, I think that's the part that helps to pull out the nails. And what about the other part, the flat part? What do you think that part's used for? Or what do you think that part is for? And they actually did say it's for knocking in the nails. Yeah. And is there anything else you could say about a hammer? Absolutely. You could talk about the material that's used to make a hammer. So what's the handle made out of? What do you think? And you might say, oh, I think it's made out of wood. Or I have actually seen hammers that are made out of metal. So you can say it could also be made out of the same stuff as that. Do you think this is also made out of wood? And they'll say, I don't know, depending, so you get very interesting responses and you expound on those responses. So if they say yes, then you might want to explain, do you think we'll be able to use a wood to be able to remove nails, or do you think it has to be something a bit stronger? And then you say, well, I think something a bit stronger. What is that thing that's a bit stronger? And yeah, so supply the language. So it's metal. Or you might say, so that they can, to help them think through what that material is, you could say, I'd say this part here is a bit heavier. So if the wood, wood can be heavy, but this part here is heavier than the wood. What material do you think is heavier than wood? And then give illustrations that are, accessible for your child. And I feel like more than just helping a child be able to say longer sentences, because you can drill longer sentences for children. You can have them memorize longer sentences and then rote say them back. And that hasn't actually achieved the purpose. I feel more that, my job as a speech pathologist isn't just to teach longer sentences, complex sentences, but to teach meaning and understanding of those sentences and what people are saying and what you're saying, and to develop in a child the ability to think. So more than me always just supplying the language and the words, I also get them, because sometimes they do have these words already, and it's just a matter of how do you help them be able to access them in this particular context. Because so if you already know this is a tool, why didn't you tell me before? It's because it wasn't saved in a way, so in that child's repertoire or brain, it wasn't saved in a way that knowledge or that word was actually useful or functional. And you can help a child be able to start to bring about the words that they have just learned, and that are not being used, they're not being applied functionally. And then I remember on this particular day, the reason why I have a bottle is because this little guy was actually playing with a bottle, and that was he was quite distracted by the bottle. And I said, okay, well, how about we describe the thing that you're playing with? And like, oh, what's that? He said, it's a bottle. I'm like, yeah, okay. And is a bottle made out of the same material as a hammer? And he said, no. What is it made out of? And he had to think, and I think he said window. And I'm like, yeah, it's made out of the same stuff as the window. So again, if your child does the same thing, gives you something that has the same material, but isn't it? You don't go straight and say, no. Like, yeah, it is made out of the same. It's not called a window though. It's made out of the same material as window. Do you know what that material is? And I probed further. It's a material that what do you think would happen if it drops on the ground? And right away, this guy said, bottle, it will break. So it's a bottle. And again, the word's already there. Most 5-year-olds know what a bottle is. Know what glass is, and they just now they've never used it in this context. Maybe they've always just used the word glass to refer to a container that's used for, putting a drink in. But then the bottle that this guy had was made out of the same material. So I hope that helps to illustrate how you can help a child be able to start to themselves. It's so funny. I'm sitting here and seeing all these things that are amiss. But anyway, they start to use some of the vocabulary that they do have that's just laying dormant in their brain, and then use it, functionally. So that's how you would describe a bottle. So if I was to put this together, it would be a bottle is a container, and you'd go through the same process of establishing what's that broad overarching term that this item belongs to. So, and I discourage children from saying a bottle belongs to the group called, no, it's just, yeah, so that's very rigid. So a bottle is a container that is, what's the function that's used for putting drinks in, and it is made out of glass. There could be bottles that are made out of another material. What's the other material? Could be bottles. There are bottles that are made out of plastic, and it is a long tube with a opening, and most bottles would have a lid that's used to close the bottle so that the drink doesn't spill out. And if we were to put together the description of a hammer, you could say a hammer is a tool. It has a long handle that is made out of wood. Some hammers have handles that are made out of metal, and it has a top part. A top part, so that vocabulary, important, top part, or its head has a claw that's used for, pulling nails out, and it also has a flat head that's the part that's used to knock nails in. And just like that, you have probably then been able to get your child to start to, when they are thinking about words, this child can now start to think about all the other vocabulary that they already know that can be applied in expanding their sentences or in describing this item, to go beyond just saying its label or its name, which is a hammer or a bottle. So I hope that's been useful. I hope you can use these tips to help your child that is saying a lot to even be able to say more and say more complex things, and to develop a habit of thought and a habit of thinking, because it is from what a child already knows that they're able to form meaning to what is being said to them or what is being taught to them. So we never learn something from a vacuum. So when you're learning something new, there's always a expectation that there's something to hang that knowledge on. So if I'm going to teach you a foreign language, there has to be a starting point to that. So first of all, that there has to be some shared, or rather some presumed knowledge that then I am able to come and add a little bit and add a little bit and add a little bit. And if you're teaching something that a child is not able to access because it's too far removed from their own understanding, then learning doesn't take place. So always remember that, because you can have an activity like this that for one child ends up being a rote activity where they're just memorizing things but it never sticks, and you could involve them in a back and forth exchange where you get them to think about things and you're like, and then that experience for them is going to be more lasting because they did draw upon what was already known, and they can see the applications of it, and it's just better, it's more robust. So if you like these tips and you'd like to be alerted to when I am sharing new tips, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is Speech Therapy Tutorials. And thank you so much, and I will catch you in the next video, and all the best with growing your little one's language. Goodbye.